Hi, Kristin Snowden.
Hello.
Welcome
Hi,
to
everyone.
May.
Yeah, it's wow. Okay, when you said it, it made it more real. Hi, everyone. My name's Kristin Snowden, and this is a free webinar provided by sexandrelationshiphealing.com. I meet one time a month. It's free and accessible to anyone. It's the second Wednesday of every month at 9:30 in the morning on West Coast time. So feel free to join us. Every webinar, we cover just all things relationships. The thing I say over and over again is as humans, we are relational beings, and yet we never take any classes to learn about what goes wrong in the relationships, all the stuff that goes on within us in our chemistry, in our brain, in our neuroscience, in our mind, and our thought process, and our trauma history that impacts the way that we show up with our loved ones and friends and colleagues, etc. So I really try to share in these webinars the best of the best information that I've seen from my trainings, from my experience, and help you put a name to what might not be working anymore and provide you the tools and guidance on how to start changing unhealthy patterns. So the past, in 2021, we've been working on a series based on the book that I just released with Scott Brassard. It's Life Anonymous, and generally speaking, it talks about how I learned as a non-addict to apply the 12 steps to my life and how it really was foundational and how I was able to shift my framework, engage in healthier relationship patterns, heal some of my wounds and trauma. And it was done in it was done with other type of interventions of therapy and spirituality, et cetera. But Scott is an addict in recovery. I am a therapist who works with addicts in treatment centers, and we are now on 5. So step 1 through 4, just to summarize, is done really beautifully and purposefully, where we just identify this is no longer working for me. I've tried my best in my best thinking with my best resources, and stuff is still not working. So I need to seek out a higher power, seek out a helpful community, and ask for help, basically. And then 4 starts diving into that interpersonal, cleaning up your side of the street, really bringing up, okay, you realize things haven't worked for you. Let's start putting pen to paper. Let's start talking about, let's start investigating, exploring what exactly hasn't been working. So we do this fearless inventory of our past, our good, bad, light, dark, and really start figuring out what's been going on in our life. Really bring it to our conscious level. And then 5 goes beautifully with that, because the follow up to step 4 is step 5, which is admitted to God or your higher power, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So again, there's a lot of interpretation of what this exactly means, but generally speaking, the way that I received this is we've done all this deep work to figure out what hasn't worked, that I need help because my best thinking got me here, and I need help. I need a community. I need a higher power to surrender this all to work on a path towards being humble and realizing I can't do this alone. And then step 4, when you dive into all that muck of what's been going wrong, step 5 is about, to me, shame resiliency, the beginning steps of shame resiliency. If any of you watch my other videos, you know I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown's work in understanding how shame plays a role in your life, in your relationships, in the addiction cycle. And she always says that if you want shame to grow, you want those dark voices in you to grow, just cover them in secrecy and silence and darkness. Because if they are left back there unspoken, unshared, unprocessed, they will feed all violence, all addiction cycles, all most relationship issues, and everything that kind of stops working for us in life. So the 5th step is important because we have to start working a shame resiliency process with other people. Scott talks about in his section where he talks about addicts working the 5th step, is he was saying that most addicts are not going to be successful in staying sober and maintaining a recovery program if they don't do step 5, because it's not just about figuring out all the wrongs, all the bad things that have happened to them, the resentments, the fear, the trauma, the hurt, the pain, the wounds, the good, the bad, the light, the dark. It's about not holding it inside. In the sex addiction world, when we are talking to sex addicts, one of the biggest problems and one of the biggest things that feeds betrayal trauma by the betrayed partners is the lies. It's the double lives that people are living, trying to hide their addiction. It's about them looking at their partners who are begging them, saying, "What's going on? Something is off. Things aren't making sense to me. Why are you acting this way? Are you being so hypercritical? Where are you going? Why are you getting blocked phone calls? Why do you take your phone with you to the bathroom all the time?" And they look at them bald faced without even batting an eye, saying, "No, nothing's going on. You're crazy. If you weren't nag me so much, this wouldn't be happening. You're the one who's making these stories up in your head. You're wrong. You're bad." That kind of gaslighting of telling someone what their reality is, manipulating them, lying to them. That is what's so traumatizing. It's traumatizing to the betrayed partner, but it's also traumatizing to the addict, believe it or not, because one of the innermost shame thoughts that they have that drive this addiction is that if anyone really knew me, they couldn't love this. This is a hot mess. So I don't know how to figure out how to meet my needs within me here. And I certainly can't go to another human being in a vulnerable, intimate state to have them know me and see if we can love each other in spite of our flaws. Because the truth is, I have lied and I sneak around and I have 6 different versions of the truth going on in my life all at once, and I hold on to those. They are the weight that is drowning me in the ocean, but it is also still the only reality that I know. And so addicts get stuck in that catch 22 where they don't want to let go of all these dark secrets. They want to hold them and hide them and keep them in the dark, but at the same time, that's exactly the fuel that fires that fuel that like lights that fire, keeps that fire going, and keeps the addiction going. So step 5 is absolutely important. How some addicts do it is they will share their step 4 with their sponsor, is the most common way. So their sponsor will sit down, and that is also why there's that strong emphasis on anonymity in the 12-step program, is that we want these people to come in and feel safe, feel like, okay, guess what? The joking saying is, unless you've killed 2 people in the last week, we've heard it all. So this is a space where you can't shock us. There's no judgment. We try to meet everyone with empathy and compassion, but you got to get it out. And hopefully you will feel safe because there'll be a level of anonymity and confidentiality for you to share it with your higher power and another human being. And so they'll sit down with them and do a step, explain the step 4 and talk about all their good, bad, light, dark, stuff that the addict does not want the world to see at all, but share it with one human being. And during that time in step 5, the sponsor or whomever they chose to share the step 4 with will kind of start making notes. So that's actually another really important part of step 5, is that the listener will ask questions and point out patterns of the behaviors that he or she sees. So we do that a lot when we start seeing relationship or sexual acting out problems, is we start saying, wow, every time you use drugs, you tend to make poor decisions around sexual acting out partners. Or wow, every time you got in a fight with your wife, you would run out and act out. Every time you got a promotion or something great happened in your life, you went and acted out. So when you lay these things all out to someone who's kind of trained and experienced and understands how this all works, they can ask questions, help the addict realize what they might have not realized, because their entire wiring has been to be disconnected from the behavior, to not be aware of it. And so the questions and pointing out patterns can be really powerful, and not just they're cleaning up their side of the street, practicing shame resiliency, but really starting to notice patterns. Because so a huge part of the addiction is I just want to act out. I want to get my needs met in this weird, convoluted way, lie and manipulate to cover it up, but I don't really want to figure out why I'm doing it, the patterns of what triggers it. And yet, that's exactly the antithesis of how to get you out of that. So, let's talk a little bit about what shame resiliency is. So, in the step 4, we talk about grudges, resentments, fear, toxic shame that linger. Scott says they contaminate their soul for years. And then when you start speaking it out to another person, so I said, Brene Brown said, if you want to maintain that shame spiral, that darkness, those horrible voices that speak at you, that how much you suck, how you are a bad person, how you're screwing everything up, you're a bad mom, a bad father, a horrible employee, a bad friend, family member, etc. You have to bring them to the light and share them with other people who can meet it with empathy and compassion and non-judgment. And I've had a lot of other YouTube videos on talking about that, what empathy and compassion is, and kind of the shame resiliency process. But let's talk a little bit about shame resiliency. Our trauma and shame and flaws sit in the back of our brain, in that fight, flight, or freeze kind of like survival part of your brain. This is that lizard brain that was wired eons ago for survival and impulsive caveman-like instincts. In other words, it's not the well thought out part of your brain, the complex minded thinking that happens here in that prefrontal cortex. The longer that our trauma history, our wounds, our pain, our shame, our flaws, our screw ups remain hidden in that lizard brain, unacknowledged and unchallenged and unprocessed, the more likely it's to unconsciously bleed into every behavior that we engage in. And so the antithesis, the opposite of that, the anecdote, is that it has to be pulled out and processed. Peter Levine, a famous trauma therapist who studied how humans process and get through shame, or I'm sorry, who get through trauma, is that the long-term, alarming, debilitating, often bizarre symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, develop when we cannot complete the process of moving in, through, and out of the immobility and freezing states that those trauma experiences put us in. And the important part is that in addition to having you share it with one human being, usually your sponsor, someone where it's a safe, confidential environment. So a therapist, maybe a clergy member, if you feel safe in that environment, a safe, trusted friend who can kind of hold the space and understand it. Or again, a sponsor from one of the many 12-step fellowship programs that exist. There's the higher power. And one of the great sayings that I like from Richard Rohr, who talks about working the 12 steps from a spiritual kind of Christian point of view in breathing underwater, he says about step 5, God doesn't love us if we change. God loves us so we can change. There's a need for some higher power. And again, whether it's not like a mono deity, it could be this universe, it could be the ocean. I've heard someone say universal intelligence, universal connectedness, but it could be this love, this forgiveness that I am human, therefore I'm flawed, and I'm no different from anyone else who is flawed. There are, our society puts measurements of hierarchies of this is bad, this is good, this is acceptable, this is horrible. But shame is shame is shame, and trauma is trauma is trauma. And our greatest shame and our greatest trauma that we've ever experienced in our life is our own shame and our own trauma. And so there's got to be a space with a higher power where there's no judgment and there is empathy and compassion to say, look, what if I'm loved in spite of my flaws? The talk about that is I discuss quickly restorative justice versus retributive justice in this book, which retributive justice is when you're punished and the fear of being punished is supposed to be changing your behavior. So, if you do that again, you're going to go to jail. If you do that again, you're going to get spanked or you're going to lose this. Restorative justice is the opposite approach. It's the idea that when we make mistakes and bad choices, and we are loved anyway. So it's that kind of like, I don't like your behavior right now. Your choices are unacceptable. And these are the boundaries I'm going to set around your behavior. But I love you no matter what you do. I love that you are a flawed, vulnerable human being. And when you are loved in spite of how much you screw up, then you're moved by that grace to transform and change your behavior. That's considered restorative justice. We share our stories and we are transformed with the telling of these stories. And then at the same time, that sponsor, that person that's helping you in your recovery, that community that's supporting you, they are transformed by hearing it. I mean, Dr. Rob Weiss and I always chat, and we're always talking about the power of a group. I feel like I can be the greatest therapist in the world, but it is the power of a group setting, a group of people who are in similar struggle, who are in similar states of shame and hurt. I run several betrayed partner workshops, and it is so powerful there because it feels safe to share these dark, painful stories of what's been happening to everyone, that their partners have done these horrible things, and that they feel this anger and hurt that they would do this to them, this betrayal. And then also they often have this voice of like, and why am I sticking around? Every family member is telling me to run and to go. And this betrayed partner's environment is the only place where they feel safe to just be, to kind of sit in a safe spot, no judgment, empathy and compassion, to just sit there and let things organically start making more sense to them. They start befuddled and in shame and wanting to isolate and never share their story. And then these groups are a big step 5, in my opinion, where you get to kind of share your darkness with other people and have it met with empathy and compassion. And me too, right? That I don't have the exact same story as you, but you're not alone. This is how things have happened to me. And I hear you, and I can love you in spite of your indecision and the fact that this might not sound right or make sense to other family members or your friends, but I hear you and I get it. I get that you struggle between the fact that you have 20 years of marriage and the acting out has occurred for so many years of it, or there's been so many lies, but it's just not that black and white when it happens to you. And I can sit with you while you start figuring out how to move forward in the healthiest way. So let me just finish with a few of these points. When we share our stories in a supportive setting, new neural pathways are developed and we change the habits that led to our struggles. We and our community can work towards self-love, self-acceptance as we gather and speak the full, authentic truth to one another. Our shame begins to wipe away as we share the dark debris of our lives, receive support from others, and return the favor for other individuals who are equally imperfect and struggling with their own darkness. This is the beautiful thing that happens in the 12-step communities when done right and done with other people who are working a healthy recovery program. Yes, it's not executed perfectly all the time. But at the end of this chapter, just so you know, I have a couple different exercises and curriculum that Scott and I had written about really figuring out what some of your shame stories are in each areas of your life, exploring, recognizing shame. What does it feel like? What does it look like? How do you feel it in your body to really start helping you bring shame into a more tangible setting? Because back here, it's not connected to your language and it's really, really hard. It's one of the most complex concepts that I try to teach people, and it takes a really long time for them to really start understanding how it manifests and shows up in their life. But man, once you start figuring that out, that I'm in shame, this is what triggered the shame. I need to reach out to other people and practice some shame resiliency tools to get out of the shame. It really is a game changer, in my opinion. So, just some final things are additional points to help you with some shame resiliency for a version of the step 5. These are kind of things that I notice people struggle with. Realize that one good deed doesn't cancel out another crappy thing that you did. Everything has to be acknowledged and processed. So, one of the classic things that I see humans do is they'll do these things that are not great. Like they'll skip out of how much something bad made them feel. They might steal some office supplies from their office, but then say, I work extra hours at my office, so I deserve to steal from my company. Or I've done these really crappy things here and there, but I donate a lot of money to charity. Or I've heard a lot, yeah, I've been cheating on my wife, and yeah, I sneak around and I lie to her, but I offer her this beautiful life with this great house. And we like to believe, when we're avoiding the dark parts of our lives, the dark parts of acknowledging what we're really capable of doing and being, we like to skip out of that by kind of thinking one good deed in this area of our life cancels out another. So when you're doing those step 4s or those step 5s, be very mindful of it. Don't skip out on that. One does not cancel out the other. Make amends whenever possible and necessary with other people. So that's just kind of that keeping your side of the street clean, and we'll talk about that further down in steps 10, 11, and 12. Use trauma treatment and healthy coping skills to manage your distress, including downregulation skills. Avoid lying and manipulating others so you can keep your side of the street clean. And remind yourself that when you behave in a less than ideal way, it's often because of trauma, shame, and your defense mechanisms. Once you consciously process what went wrong, you need to forgive yourself and do better once you know better. So, step 5 can feel like you're dousing yourself in this kind of shame swamp. But the real purpose of it is to kind of leave no crevice unexplored. So you stop rationalizing, minimizing, these various defense mechanisms. So I don't have to own that I'm this flawed human being that struggles with my value and worth. And so I act out in these ways, and I rage in this certain way, and I say these mean things sometimes, or I never even try because I can't. My ego is too fragile because I can't handle failure or rejection. These are all things we do as a consequence of our trauma and our shame. And we have to courageously explore and own and share with another human being in a higher power what exactly these things are, because it is a powerful step to the whole healing and transformation process, and it cannot be skipped. And that is step 5.
Great information. And if you have questions about step 5 or anything else for Kristin, please type them in the Q&A, and we'll read those. But I was thinking you were talking about higher power, and I do have a number of people who reach out and go, I don't believe in any higher power. And I often say, you have a higher power. It's your addiction, because you're doing
Right.
everything that your addiction is. So you have one. Is it serving you well? And you mentioned love, and for a lot of people, just getting to the concept of higher power is love, which is probably a foreign concept, because in our shame spirals, we're thinking we're so unlovable. I love that you were talking about going to the dark crevices, anything that we leave unturned, anything that we leave off and omit because we're filtering through, editing what we want on our inventory. That's the stuff that's going to come back and bite us. That will continue to be the shame. The most freeing thing, I was terrified of doing my first step 5. And when I shared what I thought was like, people were going to run screaming out of the room, because it was so horrible. And they're like, oh yeah, typical addict, typical female addict, and it was like, it was so not a big deal, like you were talking about, unless you murdered 2 people this week. You know, like the stuff that I did was just like everybody else. Now, when I sit in 12-step meetings and we tell, stories or whatever, we laugh about it. Now, it was painful, horrible, shameful, and we're sitting around as a group. Just like you were talking about, group is so powerful because, it doesn't give us an excuse for doing that. It's a reason, and we have tools and support to do life differently. You talked about the body work, and I really find that that's so important to do body work, as part of that. I would love to have you said down regulation, and that's kind of a clinical term. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about, down regulation. So like, because if
Mhm,
you're just hearing that term for the first time, I think that that would be helpful. Like,
mhm.
tell us more.
Yeah, so I have two of my more well-known YouTubes where I talk about this in more detail is how our nervous system impacts our mental health and are the neurobiology of betrayal trauma. So I am speaking about some betrayal trauma, but I also apply it generally to all traumas. It's really empowering to find out the backdrop system that is running at all times, which is our autonomic nervous system. It's constantly running, picking up what's a threat. And I kind of say that our brain operates in a couple categories. We think we're all this just one unit, but the
Mhm.
truth is we have this lizard brain that's kind of really quickly runs on oxygen and blood flow, and its entire purpose is it doesn't care about relationships. It doesn't care about being a good person. It just cares about helping you survive. That's all it cares about. And then there's a couple other brains or way filter systems that we run through, which is our trauma history. So each of us have a specifically wired brain based on our trauma history, scary things we've seen, bad things that have happened to us. Our brain holds on to scary things that we've watched happen to other people or we have happened to us. And our brain wires around and says, okay, don't drive down that street. That's dangerous. Okay, planes are really bad. Okay, people that look this way are super scary. Avoid them. Okay, this is a bad situation. Get really defensive when this happens because that's your trauma history. That's the structure that's supposed to adapt to keep you alive. Then there's the shame brain, which is we are wired to connect to other people. To lose that connection is to die. So everything goes through the filter of shame, of I desperately need humans. To lose them is to equal death. So I will always run things through the system. If I really want to be loved and valued and seen, I am going to have a deep fear and I'm going to constantly take in evidence that's going to tell me how unworthy I am and how much of a screw up I am and why this package is unlovable. It's this kind of messed up adaptive skill our body has to pick up evidence to kind of say, like, oh, you failed at that test. Maybe you are really dumb and you better run on that treadmill so you can prove to yourself that you're not dumb because you need to stay in community. Or you really screwed up as a parent, you better start doing X, Y, and Z because you cannot screw up as a parent because no one will love you and you need to start being enough for getting that community, getting that love and acceptance. It's kind of that hustling for your worthiness at all facets of your life. And then there's the reality brain. So reality brain is that here and now, right? Right now, I see Tammy on the screen. Today is Wednesday morning. This is the current state of like my reality, my here and now. And all of these systems are running all the time. I have the survival brain running, I have my trauma history, I have my shame stories, and I have my here and now. And they're constantly kind of arguing and fighting with each other. So we have to down regulate those systems. And so there's just a couple of things that we use. I have kind of like a menu of down regulation items. I'm trying to find them right now. And you'll see them more on those other YouTubes I mentioned. But these are just ways that when our neurobiology fires up with the trauma and the shame voices and all that, because when you're sharing step 5, if you're doing it right, it will be one of the most uncomfortable things you've ever done in your life because your body is telling you you are in shame, you're going to lose your community, you are in your trauma because you're remembering everything horrible that's ever happened to you, and you are going to die. And so the down regulation that has to be used in this process are these various options. So it's like deep breathing, like deep body scanning, being aware, breathing. God, the most accessible, and the science continues to show over and over again that deep breathing, meditation, slowing things down, those side to side tapping. So it's like that right and left brain, talking, hugs, if that's safe to you. These are all free and accessible, and they work to downregulate your body. Um, Journaling, gratitude lists, talking to trusted others, holding pets, petting pets, yoga, tai chi, qigong, but those are all our body, mind, body, physical connection with deep breathing. Singing, because singing can help rhythmically help you with your breathing in and out. Playing sports, riding a bike, going into nature, visualizations, mindfulness, meditation, grounding techniques, going to a group support system. These are all things that you'll have to bring with you into a step 5, to what we call down regulate you back again, kind of telling that survival brain, trauma brain, shame brain, I can stay in the here and now. I'm here, I'm safe. These traumas aren't happening to me now. I can get through it. So that's helpful.
I learned a new breathing one yesterday. It was with your hand and you breathe in, breathe out,
Mm.
and all you have to do is do that. And you're paying, I think, I don't know why it works, but my thought was because you're paying attention to your hand and you're paying attention to your breathing and you're so focused just for that, like, I don't even know, minute. But I was like, oh, and for me, a lot of it is I pay attention to my feet. If I pay attention that my feet are grounded, like that somehow helps me just ground, that I'm going to be
Yeah.
okay, I'm grounded. So all of those things are super helpful. Was thinking too with the chronic PTSD, and you talked about moving through it, because like I think people, understandably, we want to shove it in the closet and put it in our past. We want to get it past, and it's through it. To me, it always is
Yeah.
moving through that, and it's, and there's pain in that. And when you were talking about step 5, I don't want people to go, oh my God, it's the most horrible thing, I don't want to do it. It's also the most freeing thing.
Right.
So it's one of those, if you don't do it, you don't get to the other side, you don't get through. You're constantly trapped in the muck that's on this side of the fence, rather than going to the
Right.
other side where other people are and they're welcoming you. And so please, I beg, don't get, I hear too many people that don't get around to steps 4 and 5 because, oh, it's going to be so horrible. Yeah, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You will survive it, and you will, like, the chains that are holding you back. I mean,
Right.
seriously, it's so freeing. So somebody posted in the comments, my husband is lagging in finding a therapist to get help. He is he is ashamed to even discuss the problem. And that's, I mean, that's being willing to be stuck, and I hate that. I hate when people go, like, I'm just too afraid, and I'm going, like, the fear won't kill you. It's going to be uncomfortable. But addicts, we all want to not feel uncomfortable. That's why we're numbing out, escaping, all of that. But if we're just willing to take those steps, like I've said it a million times, if somebody could just see, if I had a magic wand and you could see how good life can be in recovery. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong, but man, I am not shackled to the shame, that
Mhm.
I'm the most horrible person on the planet anymore. That's where I was. I
Yeah.
don't have to live like that. So
I have stories in the book, but the clients who did those disclosures, did the polygraphs, shared everything, have lived congruent to their values and goals from that moment on, with not acting out or not abusing substances, not lying and manipulating. They all, once they get out of the discomfort of that process and the hurt and the anger exchange and all that happens, not one of them ever wants to go back to that time. They've kind of almost finally come up for air and realize that addiction, that ball and chain that they were holding so tightly, was truly drowning them. And letting go of all of it, including sharing the darkness and the secrets and the lies, is what allowed them to finally come up to the surface and breathe. So it is that kind of getting through the trauma. It's painful, it's uncomfortable, it's awful to look in the mirror, awful to realize what you're capable of being, because I've been, engineering my life to avoid that my entire life. But it's the only way, and it's the most freeing way. The truth shall set you free, right?
Yeah, yeah, but the truth also includes the light. You mentioned that too. And
Mhm,
and it's really it was very easy for me to put down all the horrible things, you know. It wasn't
mhm.
easy, but that's where I went. And the column of things, in the good was, vacant. And so like I was encouraged and actually forced to by my sponsor to that you have to fill this column out too. And
Right.
it's a searching and fearless moral inventory. That means all aspects and understanding that I'm a human, I'm flawed, but I also have these strengths. And what I've really valued in recovery is the same things that were my most horrible things, my are the things that have become my strengths. Those are the things I can share, that I've come through this, and there's a path, and other people can join me on that path. So to have that twist from it's the most awful to wow, this is just part of humanity, and not every time something comes up to go oh shame. I don't live in that, oh my god, I'm such a wretch, I just don't. So we have a question. My husband is a recovering alcoholic, and him and I have both worked through the steps, him in AA and me in Al-Anon. He has compulsive behavior to be controlling and give unsolicited advice. I have had to put a boundary around this behavior. He also brings on junk food every night. Does this mean he could be stuck in shame spiral? He said he has worked through trauma with his therapist and sponsor. I'm trying to be patient and supportive and communicate concerns the best I can.
Tough one. Right. I think behind every addict is a control freak, right? So that's when it's in relationship, right? This is your partner. It's just pointing out, gosh, every day when the day calms down, the sun goes down, and we sit down to just be you and I watching TV. I think it's really interesting that this is when you bring out the food and you start binge eating. Like I just wonder. So I always look at everyone's behavior as like a sign of discomfort or not, right? Like I'm always looking at everyone's physical state when they're with me or when they're with other people as a sign of how safe their body is. And when someone's trying to control something, it's usually unconsciously that they're afraid of something. So it'd be interesting to say, hey, you're trying to control X, Y, and Z, every detail. What are you afraid of happening? Can you, let's talk, like, let's take that shame or that fear and let's bring it to the light, make him say it out loud of, unsolicited advice. When you say this, the story I tell myself is that you don't think I'm competent, that you don't think I'm responsible. Is that what's going on? Oftentimes response is like, no, I'm just so afraid of this happening to you. I want to control every little thing to stop you from suffering or me from suffering. And so I think if I control you and give you unsolicited advice, that's the way of me stopping bad things from happening. I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for your husband, but it's interesting sometimes when I've done a lot of other webinars on bringing up the story that I'm telling myself. When I see you binge eating every night, the story I'm telling myself is you're really uncomfortable right now. What's going on? What does all this bad food do for you? And how does it make you feel? Do you like it afterward? Do you hate yourself afterward? How's it working for you? Um, these are ideally things that a therapist would be processing with him, but these are not surprising behaviors. I mean, yeah, there's signs of levels of discomfort, not severe, but definitely notable for sure.
I do appreciate that you said I've had to put a boundary around this, for the unsolicited advice. And I think what Kristen just shared of the story I'm telling myself when you do this is, I think it's, and yes, addicts, like, yes, a control freak. I have to consistently and continually work on my wanting to control all aspects of everything. And,
Mhm.
and of course I can see how things would be, and whatever. It's a ongoing process. I have a lot of work to continue to do, but it's also, I'm looking at all these other things, and I'm not having to look at, actually I do. I have to look at what's going on inside me. Why am I trying to control all those things? Because I'm uncomfortable with whatever. I'm to that place where I can look at that. So that is, the food is such a deal. Food is such a comfort, and whatever, but it's also has the double-edged sword where it's comforting me now, and now I've gained weight, and now I'm unhappy about this, and so it's this whole spiral, in and of itself. Life Anonymous, the 12 steps can be applied to all behaviors, compulsive problematic behaviors. You can do a 3-circle plan on your food. You can do a 3-circle plan on, on whatever it is, even on the controlling, unsolicited advice. You can do all of what's coming up for me before I even, start doing this. Why am I uncomfortable? Why am I going, how can I change the pattern with the eating? It's like, okay, if I normally sit down and watch TV and I binge eat, maybe it's time to go for a walk. How can I interrupt that pattern, so that I
Right.
do things differently?
Right. And she's talking about the 3-circle plan. We work this for sexual sobriety. But yeah, it's used for eating disorder issues. But it's basically, it's just, this is the relapse, like not okay behavior. These are all the, speaking of patterns, this is where I start realizing all the slippery slopes. So I only binge eat after 7 o'clock. Well, what happens at 7 o'clock? The kids go to bed or everything settles down and my neurobiology starts sitting down and we watch TV, and I don't know how to watch TV and calm down and relax without shoveling food in my mouth. Something, I don't know, like everyone has their own story and pattern and reasoning and kind of wiring in their brain that's like, this works. It's kind of the pattern of insanity, but my body thinks this works right now. And so you can only interrupt it by, by therapy and trauma work, but also I think the 12 steps helps you with that. What's not
Hmm.
working for you? I need help. What can I do instead? Things like that. So,
Yeah, for me, there's a cutoff at night, and I don't eat beyond that time. I feel better. I don't feel, like the acid reflux at night. I also don't feel, that lull, that heaviness. And I mean, it was just one of those things. It was an easy switch to me to, like, at this time, I'm done, I'm done eating. And, that has worked for me because food is one of my problem areas. Gosh, I have a lot of problem areas,
I have
but
that
I've been
too.
working on them. So yeah.
I have
Okay.
definitely
Next
food
one.
issues.
Yeah. Once you have gone through the steps with a sponsor, would it be beneficial to go through the next time with someone else for a different perspective guidance?
And I think I'm going to err on Tammy's perspective on that. I mean, I guess you have to be
Uh,
careful. The word that's coming to my mind is confirmation bias.
yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you
I,
can search and search and search because you're trying to find someone who's going to say this or that it's his fault or her fault and not yours. But short of that, I think it can be helpful, if someone to help you who's more specialized in food issues and maybe not sexual acting out issues, if that's the way you want to look at it.
and to me, so the steps, and I've done all the steps multiple times. I live in 10, 11, and 12. Those, those are the maintenance steps. So like I did not go back and redo the same stuff that was on my first fourth step. Like I have, like that was done because that was in my past. I'd cleaned up the wreckage of that and moved on. Did more stuff come up? Yes. Do I have the steps to be able to do that? So, but I like what Kristen is saying, because I think that there might be some things that you go, wow, that came up on my fourth and fifth step. My sponsor helped me identify some patterns. Now I'm going to go get some professional help to work on those areas. So I think a little differently. Continue to do the steps when they were first designed. It was like, do the steps, do them, regularly. Like they'd have you sit down and do the steps, the first time you showed up at a meeting, and then more, as you became more clear-headed and more stuff comes up, stuff will come up. You will be amazed. A couple of years in, you might go, oh, that should have been on my fourth step. Guess what? You can go do that. You can go clean it up. It's not like, oh, I missed the opportunity. Life is
Right.
an opportunity. So I don't think I would necessarily, um, particularly with fourth and fifth step, I would not rehash all those same things in the same way with just another person. If there's components, go get some professional help around that. The rest of the steps, you keep doing it. I mean, I live them. I mean, I have to live them. That's what that's how I don't relapse. I have my little areas to work on. But so this came up the other day. I'll quick share, but there was something where, I needed patience. And I have worked really, really, really hard on patience. And I said, like, I'm never going to get good at patience. I just am not. I have accepted that this is going to be a chronic problem for me forever. And I'm going to have I know my serenity is directly affected when I'm being impatient. So I have to focus on that. But I am never going to be this Zen person that is just ultimately patient. It's just not me. But the steps help me work on those things and have serenity and know that I'm okay and I don't have to relapse about whatever it is that, I'm not, excelling at that moment. So, okay, next question. If an addict is given a clinically diagnosed antisocial and avoidant personality disorders, when deep shame is present, how is recovery process different for them with a CSAT treating them? For an addict who cannot stop lying, directing the narrative of his recovery and not telling the CSAT some dark secrets he did in the past. My husband is ending our marriage because he cannot sit in my pain and blaming my trauma. I wonder if it is his disorders as part of this.
I'm sorry. That sounds like it's all very painful. And while I don't know enough about this person to speak about it directly, a lot of addicts who are active addicts are given what we call access to diagnoses, the narcissistic, avoidant, antisocial, some borderline, etc. The problem that I have with access to is that this type of diagnosis, it's a clinical diagnosis. It's kind of supposed to be like a heads up. This is a major issue that comes in with this person in the room when you're dealing with them. So just kind of be aware of it. The problem that I have with access to diagnoses is that the fundamental part of it is that it's supposed to be unchanging, is that it's supposed to be a part of their personality, period. And I come from a place where I've seen people dramatically change in their life. I've seen almost every addict that starts in treatment with me, if they get the right kind of recovery and start working a recovery program in the way that we've been talking about in these webinars, magically the narcissism starts dissipating. Will there be characteristics? Absolutely. I have characteristics of narcissism quite frequently. I can also sometimes be borderline-ish. Like, I think every human's capable of having various levels of these, but when they get recovery or do work on their trauma, this stuff starts going away. But if a person is still lying or not telling the people who are trying to help him or her be treated and get into recovery and get to a better place, and they're not giving them all the information they need, that's probably a sign that he or she's not ready. uh they're not actually doing recovery, that they're not working a program. If they're withholding information, that's addiction, and that's going to look like access to antisocial, avoidant, all of those kind of things.
So they add, this is 5 years in recovery, and I'm with you, Kristen. This is 0 in recovery. Recovery is people changing.
Right.
Stopping the behavior is stopping the behavior. So abstinence, maybe. And I don't even know about that. But the lying, Dr. Rob wrote Out of the Doghouse. And part of it is stop lying about all things. You said clinically diagnosed, and I'd be curious if it was clinically diagnosed by an addiction specialist, because a general therapist, while it can be amazing, if they are not aware of how to treat that's different. Now I do hear CSAT, so a CSAT does have the skills to treat this. So I don't know if the CSAT diagnosed, and this is not therapy. So, but to your point and to Kristen's, this is somebody who wants to continue living in addiction, is stopping the marriage because doesn't want to really do the work. So I'd say 0 recovery. I'm glad you're here. I hope you get healing for you and understand that it's his addiction, the betrayal is real, the hurt is real for you, but this is his problem, and the you're caught in the wake of that. So next question. What's your perspective on the betrayed partner being part of the SA's primary support system regarding step work? No. My trauma history influence, you know where I stand on that. My trauma history influences that I'm able to detach. Okay, I'm going to take a deep breath. Detach, empathize, and support his inclinations, behaviors, and feelings in a way that doesn't traumatize me further, because it helps me feel safer that he's vulnerable and honest with me. And the not knowing his deep work makes me fear that there's important stuff I'm not going to be able to know or understand. We do a great job of communicating around this sort of thing, signs or slips, etc. And he's working to avoid lying around slips and doing well right now in this area. But generally, it seems discouraged for partners to have that much involvement in the SA step work, which is understandable since this may re-traumatize many. But what about it? If the not knowing about the work carries a bigger sense of vulnerability to repeat trauma? Is there a healthy way of coping, or might this lead to bigger emotional issues to sort out later?
It's a big one. There's always that age-old question in the CSAT or sex addiction treatment community about disclosure and how much should the betrayed partners know, right? Because don't it's great that you can identify who just asked that question. Step 5, if you recall, it's writing out that good, bad, light, dark. And that can be like childhood traumas, bad things you did, darkness that you've not wanted to unveil, but you do to like a sponsor or a therapist or something. That doesn't always exactly precisely translate into what goes on a disclosure, right? About when sometimes sex addicts, they do a full disclosure for their betrayed partners and talk about their acting out behaviors. So that's always a really big question about how much should be confidential, and yes, it should be talked about and brought into the light to somebody, maybe a clinician, maybe a sponsor. And there's always that question of, should the betrayed partner know anything and everything about the past? So it's, you have to delineate, like, let's be clear, anything happening in the here and now, or in the time of the marriage, or the ways that you were lied to and manipulated and harmed, and how the recovery process is going now. Like, you absolutely have the right to learn about and set boundaries around that kind of information. um a sponsor, many people in the recovery world, the addiction world, it says a sponsor's relationship to the recovering addict is supposed to be sacred. Like, that's kind of a separate world. And so there's the work with like a therapist, there's the work with the sponsor and his or her 12-step community, and then there's the repair work, the trust rebuilding, the intimacy building with the betrayed partner. They're all supposed to kind of interact with and complement one another, but there still has to be safe spaces for people to kind of talk. I mean, just things that come to mind is, a marriage and what goes on in a marriage is never entitlement or reasoning or excuses for someone to go act out in their addiction and lie about it. However, in sometimes therapy, the addict will eventually start talking about frustrations in the marriage, things that he or she want to communicate, and then that'll help them improve the marriage, etc. But those are still supposed to be separate safe spaces for different healing processes to occur. Am I making sense, Tammy? Like, are you getting
Yes.
what I'm trying to say?
Yes. So, and my biggest reaction is, well, I have several. One is, this addict is being prevented from being in community. They are not working with the community of people who has been through this before. And I mean, that's the whole point of 12 step, is the sponsor has been through this before and guides them through that. And you are not getting support, so you're looking for each other, to support each other, and because you have the ability to dissociate and all that, you need support to go work on those issues. And no matter what you learn, and Dr. Rob just talked about this Monday night on the webinar, no matter how much you know, you're always going to be fearful that there's more. And so
Right.
it's creating the system where it's just the two of you, and what 12 step is just like I said earlier, it's like we're sitting around in a group and we're talking about stuff, and it means like it's the safe space that Kristen was just talking about too. It's like you need other people, and unless you are in recovery, which I still think that's a horrible idea, but if you are in recovery for those exact issues and have gone through the 12 steps, then you can guide somebody through the 12 steps. But if you haven't done it before, it's the blind leading the blind. You're getting the information you want. So you're getting, oh yeah, now I'm knowing, and you're creating that just the two of you rather than the community to support you and guide you. So I personally have a lot of fear around this. I don't think that is the supportive community that both of you, each of you need and deserve to move into healing.
Yeah. And I want to validate that you're doing nothing wrong. This is just you seeking safety,
Yeah.
and I want to honor that. But you've got to maybe start learning how to seek safety. Like in step 3, it's that kind of humbling and surrendering that you need to seek out another community to kind of lean on, because your partner could relapse. He could be lying, and you can't kind of cling to that relationship and that process in hopes that's going to keep you safe and grounded and stable. You need that other space to go to. And I think that's what Tammy was saying.
Yes. Yeah, yes, in a not as eloquent way. Thank you. So, so one of the things I was thinking about too is like, we talk about like the person receiving the reports on the filtering systems. It should be a sponsor or therapist. Ideally not the partner, because like then you're the police. You're in a different relationship. It's not creating this partnership. So I think that there's better ways to do it. You ultimately get to pick. So,
Yeah,
um,
well said.
oh, so I bought your 12-step book. Is there a weekly online group that will help me work through it?
Not yet.
Uh,
Maybe eventually we'll try to put something up there, but yeah, it's not
yeah,
yet. My children need to go back to school for a full day,
yeah.
and then we can start expanding into
I hear
into
you.
things
I
like
hear
that.
you. Yeah,
They
it's
need to
just
be at
it's
school for longer than 4 days a week for 2 hours. Then I
yes,
might be able to do work.
yeah.
So,
We're all doing the best we can. So, do you think with food it is better to eat one bad meal and undereat, or eat 3 meals a day of healthy food and overeat?
as a therapist, I have to stay in my lane, and food, like asking nutritional information is not, that's something that I think you have to talk to with a nutritionalist or I care more about what you're not doing and why you're doing it, right? So I care about what happens to you when you choose to eat a bad meal, and what happens to you during it, after it, how you feel about it, does it bring shame, etc. And so I care more about patterns and the psychology behind it.
So on Super Saturday Recovery Summit, which Kristen did one of those, but I had Lulu Cook, and she did an amazing job of talking about food and the foods that will help us curb our cravings across the board.
Hmm.
So email me, Tammy, TAMI at seekingintegrity.com, and I'll send you a link to that. Dr. Rob also did a podcast with her on sex, love, and addiction. I have had so many struggles with food. I should do something on that at some point,
You and me both. We'll
on
work it
the site. Yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because, I mean, it has been a challenge, and for me to find a healthy space where if I eat, and like I had to take out bad and good, because honestly, the moralistic and judging things, I had to go. If I chose not as wisely, if I choose to have, those, 2 cookies or whatever it is, that's okay, as long as I've, done these things. But, I like, I'm not going to gain 20 pounds in 5 seconds, like it was such a battle for me. So to find a system that worked for me, that will help me live without constantly spending all my mental energy wondering about food, and really going back to what am I looking food to do. If food is
Right.
energy, food is fuel. I need food is life sustaining. If I want my body to be able to function in this world and be healthy in COVID and all of this stuff, I need to give it the right fuel. So that's what I work really hard at doing. So um lots more to be said on that. But yeah, but food is like, I can't tell you how many people, over the years, in my 12-step group, they've stopped they've stopped drinking or drugging or whatever, but they've gained
Hmm.
50 pounds. And I'm like,
Yep.
it's just switching. And I can so relate to that. So,
There are
they
12
added,
steps for
yes,
Overeaters Anonymous, food
yes, yes.
addicts.
Yeah,
So there are
yeah. So
programs.
yes, there are, and the three circle on food. I mean, doing the same, applying the same things to all aspect, any compulsive thing, anything that we're looking to take us offline and numb us out, and all of that. There are tools we can use. So, to the sponsor one, the sponsor 12-step community, individual and couples therapists are all involved. This is not in place of anything, if that helps to clarify. So yeah, I mean, again, you get to pick,
Yeah,
what
your
works for
your
you.
goal is
So,
to get safe and feel safe, and I think with all those people involved, you can get there. So yeah, I want to validate that.
and somebody commented, I feel like I don't know who my husband is. And that is, and I had several calls this morning and they talked about that. It's like, I like this double life. It's like who did I marry? Dated, years. Why didn't he tell me this? And that goes back to the lizard brain that Kristen was talking about. I'm going to hold on to what I want to do no matter what. I feel like I just feel duped on
Duped,
so many
yeah.
levels. Yeah, he looks like this amazing husband, and etc. And I'm looking at him totally differently. Yes, yeah, that's betrayal trauma. So,
Yes, I would encourage you to find a supportive group. I'm sorry, you are sharing very similar stories to many other people, and I want you to go to a safe space where you can feel supported in this, because I think the most important part right now is you say you want to stand by and support him, but I I want you to get support. I want you to be supported. I want you to feel safe and start figuring out what this all means to you.
and
So,
they're on sexandrelationshiphealing.com on Wednesdays at 12:30 Pacific time. There is a betrayed partner group. There's another one tomorrow morning. There's options on that. KristenSnowden.com also has betrayed partner support. I give out her information often. So there are resources. You can always email me, Tammy, TAMI, at seekingintegrity.com, and I will be happy to help you with any of the resources that I can. And we have a treatment program for guys like him, residential treatment. That's what we do. It's expert treatment. We really dig into the underlying reasons. Why is he doing that despite negative consequences? You love him, you care about him, and he's doing this, what seems like completely crazy stuff. But, there's a reason. And that's what we work on, stopping the behavior and helping them so that they don't just switch to a different form. So I think we're out of time. So uh, do we have time for one more quick one?
sure.
Okay, this is the last one. My husband is trying to get to the root issues of his sex addiction. What are your suggestions on where or who he should go for this? He is going to a CSAT therapist now for 5 months, but he's frustrated that he doesn't have the answers and what happened to him as a child. He can remember pieces, but not all of that. Come to us. That's what we do. I mean, really, in 14 days, to invest 14 days to
You
have a
mean seeking
life-changing
integrity?
experience. Yeah, 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 yeah. Not us. Yeah. Yeah, no, Seeking Integrity, Los Angeles, that's what we do. Dr. Rob works directly with the clients. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not exaggerating. Like I get emails and calls
Yeah.
from guys that have been through the program and they have transformed their lives. And like regular therapy, even with great therapists like Kristin Snowden, it takes a long time to, and so to have it compressed into a shorter period of time where you've got these experts safely cocooned in this space, and the experts are
Yeah.
really helping. It's changing. So
And as someone who's worked next to Rob Weiss, who's my little shout out to him, I've seen him in session. I don't know if there's another therapist that I've watched get to the root of issues faster than that man. He knows his stuff. He gets there fast. If you can handle the really strong presence that he comes in with and the really direct format of his communication, if you can kind of let that wash over you, but really hear the content of what he's saying, he knows his stuff and he helps you get to the root issues real fast.
and he does that. And the other aspect that we've been talking about is the group and the rest of the clinicians are there to hold this space for you, to hold you, and he doesn't like hit you over the head with a hammer. I mean, he can finesse, but he does directly is a master at identifying issues and seeing through the BS, quite frankly. So, because it can be this whole dance of like, no, all the,
Mhm.
look over here. And he's like, no, this, so.
Mhm.
So thank you, Kristin Snowden. We'll see you in June for step 6. Again, reach out to either of us if you've got questions, or we can be supportive, but we'll see you next month. Bye,
Thank you so
everybody.
much, everyone. Thank you for joining. Take care.
Bye-bye.